Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we're working on a massive mantle. This is a chunk of white oak that is beautiful and old, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun. Let's dive in. This thing is a lot heavier than it looks. I cut it down up in the garage to 5 foot. Originally it came out of a 16-foot beam. So I have a 5-foot piece, a little 3-foot piece, and then an 8-foot piece. And so this is the 5-foot piece that we turned into the mantle for this project. Now I'm actually doing this as a project for a friend. So all they're paying for is finish and the lumber itself. And I get to make a video out of it, so it should be a little fun. Now on the back of this, I actually want the face that mounts against the wall to be flat. And so we need to go through and figure out what it needs. And it was a rather twisted beam, as most large chunks of hardwood are. And this particular one is 8 inches by 6 inches, so it's pretty beefy. And the white oak just coming through was making me really happy. But we need to use winding sticks and straight edges and find out where it needs to go. You can see how I'm planing a lot along the side closest to us, and then at the other corner I'm going opposite there. And I want to actually make sure that this side is flat. So I'm using this as a straight edge, not as a square. And then I'll use winding sticks and check to see where the wind is, and then use a straight edges going diagonal, and that will tell me exactly where I need to be on this whole thing. Once I get the back flat, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean because it's going to be going up against a brick facade, but it needs to be flat enough so it's touching the brick at all points. Now I can lay out the mortise. Now this is going to be a rather large mortise. It goes onto a 2x4 on the wall, and so it's going to be 34 inches long by 2x4 in size. And then at the end there are two 2x4s that stick 3 inches into this. And so for this I get to use my new beam drill. Happiness! And found out that the wood auger bits actually fit in the beam drill perfectly because they have a 1/2 inch shank. So if you're ever looking for shanks for the beam drill, the wood augers work. As long as you have both set screws in. You can't do it just one or the other because the set screws go into the hex shank. They're also a good bit shorter than the original one, so you can't go quite as deep. But if you're doing like a 6 or 7 inch hole, they should treat you perfectly. And I was very pleased to see that these went in because they just cranked right down through quickly. So what I did is I drilled in at both ends where the 2x4s will recess into this beam, and this it goes in 3 inches. So I drilled down 3¼ inches, and now I'm going to come back through and square out all of these mortises. I don't have to keep them perfectly clean because this is all in the back and will be hidden by the wall. But we're going to drill out everything, then come in and slowly remove all the excess. And it's a great chance to use that corner chisel, which I pretty much only use on timber framing projects. But yeah, it comes in pretty useful here. The slick didn't have too many uses in this because it's still a bit small for that. But in between these two mortises that are about 34 inches, I need to put in one big long mortise, or basically at this point a groove, running the whole length, 1.5 inches deep. It was actually a little bit over 1.5 inches because the board didn't sink down. So it was worth my time to actually use the brace and bit and bore down 1.5 inches. Some of these I ended up taking it off the bench and doing it with the beam drill because it goes a little bit faster. But then my arms would get tired from doing the beam drill, and I would switch back over to the brace and bit until eventually I had all the holes drilled and had lots of wood curls. Lots and lots of wood curls. Yeah, that's a lot of big holes. And now it's like Swiss cheese, but it's a lot easier to remove everything in between. It took me about an hour to drill all the holes, and then about another 20-30 minutes to come in and pop out all of this, which was a ton of fun. Anytime you get to take out large chunks, it is incredibly enjoyable, and yeah, just well worth it. So we're going through this, making sure to try and keep good clean edges on this. We'll be chopping down on the side and then paring out, chopping down the side, paring out, and then coming back through. And then I'm going to be fitting in, I have this scrap of 2x4. I want to make sure it press fits in there. It's a little bit tighter than I want right there. I want it to be able to slide around, but I want it to be relatively snug. I want this to be held on by the boards that it's sliding onto. And the couple screws I'll put into it will be for a little more than just peace of mind. And here's where the slick actually came in pretty nicely. I can do bevel down and come through and flatten out the bottom. It allowed me to get the force behind it and chip in. So this allowed me to catch anything that'd be sticking up, and otherwise it would just slide. And it came out pretty well. You can see all of the dross left over from this. lots of fun. This was actually a really, really cool part of the project. So the next thing I need to do is start treating the outside of this. And they wanted to keep all of the rough sawn look, but they wanted to smooth it out. They didn't want any rough feeling. They didn't want any splinters, and they wanted it to be pretty much glossy. So on the end grain, I'm keeping the sawn marks from the chainsaw, but I'm going to be getting rid of all the excess with the low angle. And then on the surface, I'm just going to hit it very lightly with card scrapers. I really don't want to take off much. You can see I'm getting more dust than shavings because it's skipping from the top of one cut to the next. And you can see how it's leaving the valleys, but taking off the sharp outsides. And once I get it down to a point where it feels good to the hand, then we're going to add stain. And this thing just soaked up the stain like mad, and so it was a bit challenging making sure I'm getting the even amount of stain on the whole thing. But basically you want to put on the same amount, let it soak in, and then make sure there's no pools on top that are continuing to soak down. And so I'm using a rag and just letting the wood take up what it wants without putting on too much. I found that eventually it was just a little bit faster to use the brush than the rag. It also gave me a better chance of giving an even color on rather than diluting it and double layering. And then I can come back with the rag and wipe off any excess that's sitting on the top. That way I'll get a nice clean look to it. So for the actual finish on this, we're going to be using Gleam. It's actually the Total Boat Marine varnish, so it's good for outside. But I had a decent amount of it in stock from the bench project, so I figured might as well use this. And an exterior varnish is going to treat you just as well interior. In between coats, we're going to hit it with some 800 grit sandpaper, getting rid of any of the buildup that might have been on from the varnish. The first coat I put on pure varnish, make it nice and thick, and then get off any of the dust. Then I'll come back through with a tacky cloth and clean out anything on there. For all the other coats, I'm actually going to do a thinned down varnish. So we're going to be using mineral spirits, or if you're in other countries, this is white spirits, and then varnish 50-50. And this will give you a lighter coat so you can put on thinner coats for each of them. I put on a thick coat for the first one because the wood is just going to soak it up. And putting on a couple thin coats, it's harder to do the first coat with the thinned out version. But if you put it on the thick stuff, the wood soaks it up and you don't get any texture difference on there. I ended up putting 7 coats on here, letting them set in between and then sanding in between all the coats. And after about 4 days worth of work, we have the beam. So here you can see how it's going to mount onto the wall. The old mantle came off with 2 screws on there, and that whole mortise was designed to fit onto this structure. And this thing was a bit of fun to work in, and it took a good bit of work to lift it up and fit it into place. And we took it on and off, pushed it into place, removed some material, pushed it into place, take it off, put it on, and eventually we ended up taking off the 2x4 that was flat against the wall. So I didn't have to mortise out all of that, but it wasn't really needed for this mantle. It was on there for the last one so they could put screws in between. But in this one we really don't need those because we're just putting in the 2 screws in the main beam. Speaking of the screws, I didn't pre-drill in the shop because I wanted to make sure I was exactly where I needed to be. And then we put in 3 of these really big honking screws, Torx bit heads. And yes, I do have power drills. I have all my power tools. And for this, I wasn't going to be in the shop wasting the time of my friends. So I decided to bring the drills and just put it in with the drill. 2 screws. I guess that's okay. But I was really happy with how this came out, and the clients were even more happy. So that is what is important. So let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe I'll make one of these for myself. Do it a little bit differently. So there you go. This is a little bit different because I ended up using some power tools because I was doing it in a friend's house. I made this for their house, and so it's very different from what I would want. They wanted a little bit more of a glossy surface. I would have gone for something a little more matte. But everyone's a little bit different, so this was a chance to try something a little bit more fun. This is actually out of a chunk of white oak that is 8x6, solid old piece from a barn that's over 100 years old. I have about another 8 feet of this this in stock, so I might be doing something more with it in the future. This particular piece was actually the test sample where we tested stains and colors and finishes so we could get the right thing on there. This is a really simple project, especially with one like this where there were just 2x4s sticking out we could mount into it. It was a good all-around fun time. And anytime you get to work with a big slab of white oak, well, it's happy. So I hope you like this. Let me know if you have any questions, ideas, comments, concerns, thoughts. Let me know those down below. And I think that'll about do it for now. I do want to say a huge thank you to all the patrons on Patreon, members here on the channel. You are the reason why I can build things like this and keep videos coming. You are quite literally the reason that the lights are on in the shop. So I think that'll about do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This really brings new meaning to passing on the mantle.